All right, so today we're going deep on something pretty intense, actually, how gangs are using social media, and you listeners have sent us some seriously interesting stuff, news stories, expert analysis, even some firsthand accounts. And I think we're going to uncover some things that are way more complex than just the headlines. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a world most people only ever see from the outside, I think. And the thing is, social media isn't just like a tool for gangs. It's like totally reshaping how they operate, recruiting, communicating, how violence plays out, all that.
Totally. And speaking of violence, this one story from Detroit really stuck with me. Gangs are posting like actual hit lists on Instagram straight up, and it led to several people being murdered. They even had like a nickname for the area 4820 DIE. That's heavy stuff. What was it about that case that stuck out to you?
I think that one really shows the power dynamics at play. It's not just about communication. It's about being seen,
Hmm.
being dominant. Like traditionally gangs do it. But their influence way beyond that. It's like a digital turf war.
Claiming digital territory, that's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah.
But it makes sense, right? Because like anyone else, gangs are using different platforms for different purposes. Like I read the Snapchat with the disappearing messages is perfect for coordinating drug deals because there's no trace.
Right. And then there's Instagram where you see them using hashtags to find connections for everything from weapons to really anything illegal you can imagine.
It's crazy. And we can't forget about emojis. I mean, that's not just to avoid detection. It's like a whole code, right? A pizza slice might represent a certain drug or weapon. It's
Yeah.
wild.
It's about staying one step ahead of law enforcement for sure.
Like a secret language right in plain sight. But what about all the young people who are getting caught up in this? I mean, social media is their world practically. They got to be extra vulnerable, right?
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Traditional gang recruitment, that was all about physical presence,
Yeah.
word of mouth, But now you've got these slick online campaigns that make that lifestyle look glamorous.
Mm-hmm.
They offer belonging, a sense of purpose, and that can be so powerful for a young person who's feeling lost or marginalized.
And it's not always about seeking out that life either. We saw a story about a young man who was pressured by a family member to become a money mule, moving illegal money through his bank account. He ended up blacklisted for years, faced serious consequences, and he didn't even fully understand the risks.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
Right. That's a perfect example of how easily young people can be manipulated online, and they don't always realize the long-term impact. It highlights the challenges these platforms face in trying to regulate this activity. It's a constant battle.
So we've got this scary situation, gangs spreading their influence, recruiting young people. But isn't social media kind of a double-edged sword? I mean, all that online activity also leaves a trail, right?
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting, because while this all poses some huge risks, social media also offers some unexpected opportunities for positive change.
Wait, really? I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, there's this social worker named Desmond Patton who runs the Safe Lab, and they're actually using social media to understand and prevent gang violence. And they've found some amazing things, like how expressions of grief and loss online, like after a friend's death, often come right before more aggressive posts like threats. That creates a window for intervention.
So by analyzing social media, they can actually predict potential violence. That's incredible. But how do they actually intervene? I mean, what can they do with that information?
It's not about stopping every single act. It's more about understanding the patterns they're working on, ways to identify those at-risk individuals and connect them with support systems before things escalate. Sometimes just having someone who listens and understands can make all the difference.
Yeah, and it's not just about individual intervention either, right? Social media has this power to expose violence and empower survivors to speak out. I mean, think about movements like Me Too and Black Lives Matter. Those wouldn't have gotten so big without social media.
Absolutely. It's like social media can amplify the voices of those who've been silenced or ignored. But it's not just about awareness. Either law enforcement agencies are also using it to track gang activity, identify suspects, gather evidence. I even read about police using Facebook posts to build a case against someone in a tax fraud trial.
Oh, wow. So law enforcement is really tapping into this, and I bet that's led to some pretty sophisticated tools, right?
Oh, definitely they are, and they have to be.
Okay, so we've got gangs using coded language and emojis to avoid detection, and then we've got law enforcement using digital forensics to crack those codes. Can you give us a quick rundown of how that works? What kind of digital footprints are they looking for?
Well, it's all about analyzing patterns and connections. Digital forensics experts can track online activity, decipher that coded language we talked about, even map out entire gang networks.
Whoa, that's like something straight out of a crime drama. I had no idea it was so advanced. But doesn't that raise some ethical concerns? Like, how much access should law enforcement have to people's social media? Like, Where's the line between investigation and invasion of privacy?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's the balance between protecting the public and safeguarding individual rights. It's something we're all grappling with right now, and there aren't any easy answers. But one thing's for sure, the way gangs use social media is constantly changing, so law enforcement has to adapt just as quickly.
This is heavy stuff. It feels like we've only just scratched the surface here. What else have we got in this stack of sources?
Oh, we've only just begun.
Yeah.
There's so much more to explore, like how are gangs using social media to project a certain image? How effective are law enforcement's efforts to combat gang activity online? And are there any other unexpected ways social media is being used to address this problem?
Whoa, we're going deep. I'm ready to dive back in.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we've talked about how gangs are using social media to communicate and code recruit new members and even claim digital territory. But what about the image they're projecting online? Like, it's not just random posts, right? There's got to be a strategy behind it.
Oh, absolutely. It's all about crafting this narrative.
Yeah.
They want to showcase their power, their wealth, their influence, and create this like aura of invincibility.
So what are some of the ways they do that? Are there different approaches for different gangs or platforms?
For sure. I mean, you see a lot of videos, images of luxury cars, expensive clothes, stacks of cash, those classic symbols of status and success.
Yeah.
It's all about attracting new recruits, intimidating rivals, and even like influencing public perception.
It's like a twisted version of influencer culture almost, but we both know the reality of gang life is far from glamorous.
Exactly. Behind that flashy facade online, there's a whole lot of violence, poverty, exploitation, but that often gets hidden,
Yeah.
Especially on social media where everyone's trying to present their best self.
So it's all about perception versus reality. They're creating this illusion of power and success to kind of mask the very real dangers and consequences. But how is law enforcement trying to combat all of this? I mean, it must be tough to keep up with the constantly shifting tactics online.
It's a huge challenge, but law enforcement is getting more sophisticated.
Yeah.
They're using a combination of social media, monitoring, digital forensics, even undercover operations to try and infiltrate those online gang networks.
That sounds intense. Are those efforts actually making a difference, though?
They're having some wins, for sure. I mean, we talked about the Detroit police cracking down on those gangs using Instagram hit lists. That was a big one. But it also shows how reactive these efforts often are. Law enforcement often has to wait for something to happen before they can really step in.
So it's like a never-ending cycle. You shut down one operation, another one pops up somewhere else. What about a more preventative approach? Is anyone working on that side of things?
There are some proactive initiatives, for sure. Some law enforcement agencies are partnering with community organizations to educate young people about the dangers of gang involvement and kind of trying to demystify that allure of online gang culture.
That makes sense, trying to counter that message of power and allure with a message of hope and opportunity. But it's got to be more than just telling kids to stay away from gangs, right? How do you actually reach them and make a real impact?
It's about building trust, building relationships, providing mentorship resources, positive alternatives, creating spaces where young people feel seen, heard, and supported.
So it sounds like tackling this problem requires a multi-pronged approach of law enforcement, community, outreach, education, maybe even some responsibility from the social media platforms themselves.
Absolutely, and that brings us to a really crucial point, the role of technology and the ethical implications of all this surveillance. We touched on the potential for overreach earlier, but there's another aspect to consider.
Like, I'm all ears. What else is there?
Well, think about the algorithms that are being used to monitor social media. A lot of times, those algorithms are trained on data that reflects existing societal biases.
So you're saying these technologies could actually perpetuate the very inequalities that contribute to gang violence in the first place.
It's a very real concern if an algorithm is trained on data that disproportionately flags certain groups as high risk. It could lead to those groups being unfairly targeted, even if they're not involved in any criminal activity.
That's a terrifying thought. We're trying to use technology to solve a problem, but we could be making it worse. It's like walking a tightrope between security and freedom.
You've nailed it. It's a delicate balance, but it's a conversation we need to be having as a society. The stakes are just too high to ignore.
Totally. We can't just blindly trust technology to solve all our problems without thinking about the potential consequences.
But
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, the tactics, the challenges, the ethical concerns, but I keep thinking back to that story about the young man who became a money mule. His story really showed the human cost of all of this.
that's such an important point. It's easy to get caught up in the big picture, the trends, the statistics, but behind every data point is a real person with a real story.
And those individual stories can be so powerful they can challenge stereotypes, spark empathy, and inspire action.
They can. And that's why it's so important to amplify the voices of those who have been directly impacted by gang violence, both online and offline. Their experiences can provide valuable insights and help guide our efforts to address this problem. We need to listen to them, learn from them, and work together to create solutions that are truly effective and equitable.
I completely agree. This is so much more than just gangs and social media, isn't it? It's about understanding the forces that drive people to these groups, the systemic issues that create vulnerability, and the power of human connection to break these cycles.
You're right. It's about seeing the humanity in everyone involved, even those who have made mistakes or taken a wrong path.
I feel like we're finally starting to see the bigger picture here, but this is a deep dive, right? So I'm guessing there's still more to uncover.
Oh, there's always more to explore. We've talked about the big picture, but I think it's time to shift our focus. We need to zoom in on the individual level, the personal stories that really bring this issue to life.
Okay, I'm ready to get up close and personal with this. Let's hear some stories.
That's exactly what we're going to do. Get ready for a powerful journey. This is where it gets really real.
Okay, so we talked about the big picture of gangs and social media, all the tactics, the challenges, the ethical stuff, but you mentioned some personal stories, things that really bring this to life. What did you find?
There was this one story that really stayed with me about a young woman named Jakara Barnes. It was actually shared by Desmond Patton, that social worker we talked about, who uses social media to try and, understand and prevent gang violence.
Oh, yeah, I remember him. He was the one who found that, expressions of grief and loss online could predict future violence.
Yep.
Did Jakara's story kind of illustrate that?
Did you see Jakara was this young woman from Chicago who was really deep in gang activity, and the media had painted her as this hardcore criminal, a gun-toting gang girl.
Yeah.
And focusing only on the violence.
But I'm guessing Patton saw something more when he looked at her social media posts, right?
Yeah, what he found was a young woman dealing with so much pain and trauma. He found posts expressing deep grief over the loss of her friend who had been killed by the police, and those posts were often followed by way angrier, much more violent ones.
So her online persona was more like a reflection of her internal struggles, not really who she was as a person.
That's exactly what Patton argues, that these vulnerable moments online are actually these huge opportunities for intervention. He thinks that if someone had reached out to Jakara during those times of grief, things might have gone very differently for her.
It's heartbreaking to think how many other young people are out there, hiding their pain behind this mask of toughness on social media, just like Jakara. And it makes you wonder if we're even approaching this whole issue the right way.
I think Patton would agree with you there. He says, we need to go beyond just punishing and suppressing gang violence. We need to get to the root of it. The trauma, the poverty, the lack of opportunities, that feeling of being invisible that so many young people experience.
So instead of seeing gang members, we need to see individuals, human beings who are struggling and need support.
Exactly. And social media can actually be a powerful tool for that. It can give us a glimpse into their lives, their struggles, their hopes, their dreams.
It's like instead of focusing on all the negative stuff about social media, we can use it to try and understand and connect with these young people on a human level.
Right. And that's what Patton's doing with his Safe Lab. They're using social media data to try and develop these personalized interventions tailored to the specific needs of at-risk people and communities. It's about providing resources, mentorship, and a sense of belonging, things that can help them change their lives.
Wow, that sounds like there's a lot of potential there to really use this technology for good. We started this deep dive talking about the dangers of gangs using social media, but it seems like there's a real chance to use it to fight those same dangers too.
It's definitely a complicated issue, no doubt. But the biggest takeaway, I think, is the importance of perspective. Instead of just seeing young people in gangs as criminals or threats, we need to see them as children who need support, guidance, and love. Remember that question Patton asked in his TEDx talk. When will we start seeing young Black and Latino youth as children and not as public safety risks?
That's a powerful question. And honestly, it's a challenge to all of us to look at our own biases and assumptions.
It is. It's a call to action, to listen with empathy and to start seeing the humanity in everyone no matter what their past choices have been.
This deep dive has been quite a journey. We started with this scary reality of gangs using social media for violence and intimidation, but we found this potential for using it for good, too, for understanding connection and maybe even healing.
It's been an amazing exploration, and I hope it's given you a better understanding of this whole complex issue and maybe even a renewed sense of hope for the future.
It definitely has for me and for anyone listening out there. I hope this has inspired you to think about your own relationship with social media, to challenge the stories you see, and think about how you can use your voice and your actions to make a positive difference in the world.
Well said. And with that, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive. But remember, the conversation doesn't have to end here. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better world.
Until next time.